Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the lesson number 13. I'm Vitaly. I will be your instructor for a few next sessions. And in these sessions, we will be talking about a very important thing about the job interview and about working in a tech company. So as I said, we will have multiple sessions. We will have actually 3 different sessions. And in today's session, in the very first session, we are talking about the overview of the whole job interview process. It has multiple steps, and we will discuss every step. How to apply, how to go through the interviews, what kind of questions you can get during these interviews, and so on. The second session is to review a few things. We want to review, first of all, we want to review all different types of testing one more time. So we will go through all these classifications because it's really, really important to understand the difference between all these different classifications before you go to the interview. And yes, no one will ask you for these definitions during the interview, but they could ask you, do you know how to do gray box testing? Do you know how to do functional testing? And to know the answer for a question, you actually have to know if you know it or not. Do you do black box testing only, or you can also use gray box testing approach at your work? And then we switch to software development lifecycle. We talk about the work in a team, what are the responsibilities of a QA engineer on the team, and how to do your job best. And in the very last session, in our third session, we will talk about different types of employment. We talk about what's the difference between full-time employee and contractor. We talk about negotiation. We talk about how to evaluate your and estimate your salary, how to do a research on the company, how to do a research on the job field, and so on. So I believe you will have a lot of questions that are related to the salary part of the job. So please, all those questions for our last session. And in that session, I will be more than happy to give all the answers to your every question. Okay. So a little bit about myself. So I'm working as a QA team lead now. I I started my career as a DevOps engineer, worked for a few years as a DevOps engineer, maybe like 12 years ago, maybe even 14 years ago. Then I realized that I don't like it and I don't want to be better in system administrating. So I decided to switch to business part of the field. So I became a business analyst. When I was working as a business analyst, I was doing a lot of testing, and I kind of fell in love in testing, switched to manual QA, worked as a manual QA for a few years, and then got bored and decided to do automation. And now I am a tech lead. So as a tech lead, I do a lot of interviews with manual QA engineers. I interview a lot of manual QA engineers. So it gives me a pretty good understanding of about all these processes in the company. And I'm here to share all this experience with you. I want to start with a small promise just to motivate you a little bit. And I want to say that today you will see some examples and you will see some techniques that you can use in your job interview process. And it will be the case that someone of those examples, some technique, maybe only one, will be the one that gets you the job. And so the job search and job interviewing is a very complicated process, but that is my promise. By the end of the last session, you will have been exposed to a lot of ideas. And some of these ideas you will incorporate into your own repertoire, and they will ensure that you get maximum opportunity to get the job. And today, I want to start with the very basics, and I want to do the overview of the job interview process. So let's start by sharing my screen so you can see my slides, and then we can start. And of course, if you have any questions besides questions about the salary part, about negotiation, about types of employment, feel free to ask all those questions in our Zoom chat. If you want to send me a private message, you can do that as well. Just select me from the list or send to basically to the host, and no one else will see your message except me. In case if you're for some reason shy, or if you're not sure if it is a correct question to ask or not. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, just give me some pluses in the chat that you can hear me, that you can see my screen, that you can see my slides. Sometimes people don't see my screen for some reason. Okay, yes, yes, yes. Plus, very good. Okay, so making this full screen, and let's start. So I like to imagine the whole interview process as the sales funnel. And I have two reasons for that. The first reason, well, it is obviously that you can see all the steps at once, that you see your very first step, you can see your very last step, and you can see all the steps in between. So just nice visualization. And the second reason why I like this is because when you have some issues, when you have some troubles, when you're not getting enough phone calls, or when you are not doing very good at the interview, you can easily identify where is the gap, and you can hopefully you can resolve this gap. You can improve your approach in interviewing. So we have multiple steps in this sales funnel. The whole time frame for this sales funnel, I would say, so basically from the very beginning to the very end for each company is about 2 to 3 months. So you need to spend about like 2 to 3 months to actually go through all the steps. Sometimes it is less, sometimes it is more, but yes, it is time consuming. And companies takes these interviews very serious, but I will share all my experience with you and explain what to expect and what they could ask on each step. On average, our students can find their jobs in about 4 months. So you will spend about 4 months doing actively interviewing with different companies. For some of you, it will take less. For some of you, it will take more. But on average, be ready to spend about 4 months. So the very first step in this sales funnel is the resume placement. We don't talk in this session about creating a resume or creating a LinkedIn profile. For this, you will have a dedicated lesson right after my lessons, where another instructor will teach you how to create your resume, how to build an impressive LinkedIn profile, and also will give you a few templates that you can use to create your individual resume. And of course, we will help you with that process as well. We will review it, we will approve it, and then we will help you to apply to the positions. So the first step is resume placement. This is the step when you take your resume, you update your resume, and you start applying to many companies. On average, I would say you need to apply to about 200 positions before you can land a job. And that is valid not only for people who are just starting their career in tech. It doesn't matter if it is a QA, is it a dev, is it a product manager, and so on. So, and also it is valid for people who are in the industry for quite a while. So even if you have like 10 years of experience, you still need to apply to a lot of positions. This is the nature of this job market. So not every resume will be opened. You won't be invited to every company to get an interview with them. So this happens. This is just the reality of life. So you need to apply to a lot of companies. So when you apply enough, you start getting some phone calls, but obviously more often emails. And in these emails, recruiters and HRs will be asking for your availability for the next few weeks. So you just reply to this email, you provide them with your availability. You just say, okay, I am available next Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. I'm available as well next Friday from noon until 5 p.m. and maybe some other day. Also, you can say that you can do an interview only during the evening hours. That is also a possibility for you. So you provide your availability, and then HRs or recruiters will get back to you. They will confirm the time, and then the next step happens. So the next step is phone screening. This is your very, very first conversation with the company, your initial call with the company. Be ready to spend about 20 to 30 minutes for this phone call. And during this phone call, you are talking to an HR or you are talking to a recruiter. And this is not technical interview. This is just an introduction interview. They explain what they want, if it fits you. You also evaluate the company. You ask questions, and basically you are getting some information about the company, and you make a decision, as well as they make a decision if you want to move on with this company or not. Okay, so again, short interview, non-technical interview, 20-30 minutes. So when you get yes from an HR or from a recruiter, you go to the next step. The next step is technical interview, technical screening. Sometimes we call it HM screening, hiring manager screening, because the possibility that you are talking to a hiring manager is very, very high. And your hiring manager is usually a QA manager. So basically your potential manager. And as you can see from the name for this step, this interview is technical. So be ready to talk a lot about the technical part of the role. This interview usually takes about 45 minutes, from 45 minutes up to 1 hour. Usually is an online interview. So yeah, I would say like 100% online interview. So you don't need to go to the office. You don't need to talk to someone face to face. So you use Zoom, or you use Skype, or you use Google Hangouts, and you just have this interview. So after this interview, when you get yes from a hiring manager, you go to the next round of interviews. And this is the final round of interviews. This is a face-to-face interview or in-person interview. Sometimes this interview happens online. Sometimes this interview happens in the office, in the actual physical location. So you need to go and interview with the company on site. This interview is a panel interview, so you talk to multiple people. You don't talk to all these people at once. You talk to them back to back. So you will have about 4 interviews scheduled for this day. And you talk to different roles, not only QA roles. It could be someone from QA department, it could be someone from the development department, it could be an engineering manager, it could be a product manager, it could be basically anyone from the team. Someone who is somewhat technical, okay? Each person takes about 45 minutes. So be ready to spend at least 3-4 hours for this set of interviews. So about half a day. And again, this could happen online or sometimes you need to go actually physically to the office to have this interview. So when you have enough yeses from all these steps, so you have a yes from your HR, you have yes from a hiring manager, you have enough yeses from these people. So you don't need actually to have yeses from everyone from face to face. So you can fail one, potentially one or even two interviews during the step. You just need to have enough yeses. And then a company gives you a job offer. You have some time to negotiate this offer, and then you reach your goal. You work at the company. Again, the whole funnel takes about 2 months. It could be less, especially if you are interviewing with a small company, which doesn't have a lot of bureaucracy in place. So it could move actually faster with small startups. And of course, the interview with big companies is much more formal. They cannot like hire you faster. This happens actually pretty often, that they need to follow all the instructions and they just cannot, cut the corner. Okay, so this is the short overview. We will definitely talk about each step in detail, but do you have any questions so far? So let me know in the chat. Does it make you weak for the job offer when you mention to them about pay negotiation? You usually do not negotiate in the very during the steps. So when you have a job offer, you can negotiate, but don't negotiate in the very beginning. You can, if they ask and if they put a lot of pressure on you and ask to give your numbers, you can do that. You can ignore that request as well. So you're not required to give your numbers, and you can negotiate after all these interviews. But definitely if they say like, oh, okay, we can give you, I don't know, 100K per year, do not negotiate right away. Don't say like, oh, this is too low for me. I want like 120 or like 150. Don't be like that. Don't negotiate right away. Will the resume only have QA info on it, or can we put our other fields on the resume? Usually your resume is about your experience in QA. So if you're applying to a QA role to work as a manual QA engineer, no one is interested in your past experience, except that experience is somewhat relevant to the current position. So example, you want to work for a fintech company and you have your previous experience in finance. So in this case, that will benefit your resume, and you can definitely put that into your resume, or you can mention that during the interview. Yes, you can do that. Otherwise, non-relevant experience, we don't usually put into the resume. So we don't want to distract HRs from your resume. So if they see that you have a lot of non-relevant experience, they probably will move on with a different candidate. So it is better to have less information, but everything is related to the QA field, then put like, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages, but like, I don't know, like 80% of the resume is non-relevant to the QA field. When getting questioned by multiple people in the face-to-face phase, what would be their positions most times? Different positions, as I said, it could be a QA engineer, it could be an automation engineer, it could be a developer, it could be an engineering manager, it could be a product manager, it could be a project manager. It could be a DevOps, it could be someone else. What about experience that all the employees requires, which is always 2-3 years? Do we have less chances without the experience? You have a little bit less chances to get an interview, but not like 50% less or like something. Maybe 15-20% less chances of being invited to the interview. And if they like you, if they like your resume, they will definitely give you a phone call and they invite you to the interview. And well, if they don't like you, they don't call you. But usually it is not the case for our students. I don't see a lot of, actually, I don't see any rejections because of the lack of experience. So they are not going to care that I'm 36 and my resume is like 5 sentences long. So if all this, if all these 5 sentences, but believe me, trust me, you will have more. We know how to present you. We will put all the experience you gained through this bootcamp, all the experience that you gained during your 2 different internships. We will squeeze this into your resume, so your resume will look very, very decent. How many rounds should we do for interview before it's just overboard? Some companies require 8+ rounds. For someone who has that less experience, I would say for someone who has like less than 10 years of experience, this will be the default scenario. So usually 3 rounds. So no sales experience, customer service experience for QA tester job. We have to see if we can put your customer service experience or your sales experience into the resume. So after this course, you will get a mentor and they will help you to prepare your resume and they will advise what to put and what not to put on your resume. What about working as an office manager? The same. We will help you to prepare your resume. Will it really matter if we only have this experience? No, because you're looking for the jobs that experienced manual QA engineers won't take. And someone has to do all these manual verifications and manual testing and just executing test cases, like hundreds and thousands of test cases every week. Do they look at soft skills? I'm coming from the medical field. How are we going to fill our resume up with just this training? Soft skills, definitely yes. So if you have soft skills like communication skills, you're a good team worker, you, I don't know, have good problem solving skills and so on, definitely you can put that into your resume. What is the approximately salary with 0 experience? We talked about this in our last session. Okay. Okay, again, I don't want to go over all the messages about your past experience. So your past experience, sometimes we can put it into your resume, sometimes we cannot, but every one of you will have a decent resume to apply to junior and mid-level positions. You can even apply to senior level positions. Just don't expect that you can get a senior job title. Sometimes they are looking for someone with, more experience, with more experience in their resume, but then they see you and they invite you to the interview, they like you, but they cannot give you this senior title. So they could end up giving you mid-level or junior position. Do we schedule dates and times to meet with mentor for our resume? Yes. Yes, you do. Again, questions about the experience, if it is relevant or not, please talk about this with your mentor. What if you design websites? Is that relevant to mention? Definitely yes. Okay, again, experience in the telecom field. Yes, that we potentially can put it into your resume, but definitely we have to talk to you. Will you be looking at our old resumes to incorporate our skills in the new resume? Yes, we can definitely do that. How many years usually takes to move from junior to middle, etc.? I would say 1 year is enough, but maybe even less. So if you want, and we will talk about this in our last session, how to move with your, how to progress with your career. But usually when you switch jobs, you get higher and higher job title. And most people, they jump from one company to another company to get a better job title and to get a better salary. When should we schedule dates with our mentor for resume? You will get a message or an email with the details. Will the internship hours be considered as some experience? Yes, definitely yes. This is your main experience, and we give you real company, so you will work on real projects with real teams, so you'll gain a lot of experience. You will see what your day-to-day work life looks like. What is a trend? Have you noticed that careerist bootcamp students have shown to land positions? What 3 things that we can focus on now? Focus on the material and practicing these skills. And I will give you a few exercises in our next session that you can practice. Is internship going to be Monday to Friday schedule? Schedule is very, very flexible. So you can work on your, when you can. Can we also apply to automation positions? If the job title says QA, manual QA, or if it says QA analyst, or if it says something else that is relevant to the manual QA field, and you see that they want you to have some coding experience or some automation experience in the job description, then yes, definitely apply to the position. So manual QAs are not involved in coding. They don't do automation. Maybe it's just a hint for you that potentially in a few years or later on, you can switch to automation. But again, no one expects from a manual QA to know how to code. So definitely apply to the positions that says manual QA. But then you see some automation in the job description. If you see that the job title says QA automation or SDET, software development engineer in test, then this position is not for you. They are actually looking for an automation engineer. I have a year of experience as a QA with Netflix. That's definitely going on resume. Yes, of course. What are the most common interview mistakes that you have noticed from the past students? So we can take that in consideration. I would say not preparing for the interview, not reading about the company, not reading about the product, not, downloading the product, or like going to their website and exploring the product before the interview. Okay, the difference between checklist and test case. So test case is a set of instructions that you need to execute to test some functionality, and checklist is just like a short overview. So you have a checklist. Basically, you have a checklist, and you have like some checks to verify that design looks good, that the page, you can open the page, you can download the application, and so on. So it's like a quick check. And the test case is so in the test case, you have detailed instructions on how to test the feature, the functionality. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions. So let's move on to the next slide. So let's talk about the resume placement. So resume placement. The rule here, apply to as many jobs as possible. On average, it takes about 200 resume submissions before you get a job offer. So again, this is valid not only for people who are new in QA, or it is also relevant for other positions and roles in tech. It is also valid for people with, 15, 20 years of experience. You just have to apply to a lot of positions. And 200 resume submissions, that's a lot. And that's why I personally prefer to organize my job search. I use Google spreadsheets to keep all my stuff organized. I know some people prefer to use something else. Some people like to use Excel sheets. Some people use Notepad. Some people use something else. This is up to you. I personally use Google spreadsheets. I find that tool suitable for this task. So in this Google spreadsheet, I have multiple columns, and first of all, I save in the first column, I save the position title, then I save the company's website, and I save the date when I applied to the position. The next thing that I always save is the version of the resume that I sent to the company. So for you, for your first job, you will probably have only one version of the resume that fits all the positions, and you'll use just one version of the resume. But for your next positions, I highly recommend you to have more than one version of your resume. So when I worked as a manual QA, I had 3 different versions of my resume. So the first version of the resume was relevant to mobile testing positions. So, and if I see that in the job description, they want me to test a mobile application, they want me to do a lot of mobile testing, I will apply with a resume that highlights all my experience in mobile testing. I don't talk about web testing, I talk only about mobile testing. I list all the tools that I know. I list that I can test on multiple devices. I know how to test on different versions. I know how to test in different environments. I know how to use ADB commands, how to use Xcode, and so on and so on. So basically, I list all the mobile testing tools. If the job posting, if the job description says that they want someone who knows how to test web applications, then I apply with my web testing resume. In that resume, I outline my experience in web testing. I say that I know how to test on different operating systems. I say that I know how to use in different browsers. I know how to use browser stack. I know how to use Chrome Dev tools, and so on. So I list all my experience that is relevant to web testing. And if I see a job posting that says that I need to test both web application and mobile application, or if it is not clear from the job description what they want me to test, then I apply with the third version of the resume, which is a combination of 2 previous resumes. Okay, so but the bottom line, I don't want to confuse my interviewers by starting talking about my experience in web testing, but in fact, I send them a resume with my mobile testing experience. So I save the version of the resume that I sent to the company. The next thing that I save is the job description. So the job description is the most valuable piece of information in a job posting. So basically, it says what you need to talk about during your interview. And since this information is very, very valuable, I save it into this file as well, because sometimes the job posting could expire, or they could remove it, or they could change it. So this happens sometimes. So I want to have the job description in my file so I can access it whenever I want. The next column is for how I apply to the position. We can apply in multiple ways. It could be a reference. A reference is when someone refers you to the company. So you have an ex-colleague, or you have a friend, or you just met someone during, I don't know, maybe maybe you met someone on some meetup, or you met someone on LinkedIn, and then you ask them to refer you to the company. The next one is direct apply. So let's say you want to work for some company, you know that company well, it's your dream company. So let's say you want to work for Amazon. So you go directly to their website, you search for open positions in QA, and you apply directly to the company through their website. It could be LinkedIn when you apply through LinkedIn. It could be something else like Glassdoor, Indeed, Dice, Monster. You reached by, I don't know, by some recruiter or so. So I usually save this information into this file as well. And last but not least, whom I talked to. So I usually save the person's name and their job title. Usually I take short interview notes. This could be valuable if they mention something that is not mentioned in the job description. So let's say they could mention that they want you to know some technology or some tool that they use in the company, but you are not familiar with that tool. So I usually take a short note about that. And then after the interview, I can Google it. I can watch a few videos on YouTube. I can buy an online course on Udemy or some other website. And then in the next interview, I can say that, well, during the previous interview, the previous interviewer has mentioned that I need to know this tool. I haven't knew that tool, so I decided to take a quick course on that tool. So now I know how to use it. Very excited to use this tool at your company. So usually this could impress your your interviewer, plus you've learned a new technology, which is also cool. You can put it into your resume. And I save the status of the interview, and the status, like, you can use your own statuses. I just use these steps. So applied, phone screening, technical screening, face-to-face negotiating, accepted the job offer. But feel free to use other statuses, as well as feel free to use other columns or not to use some columns if it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, so this file is absolutely, so be very flexible with this file. Do whatever you feel best to do. The next thing that I want to talk about is that on average, you need to apply to 30 positions every day, from 20 to 30 positions every day. But feel free to adjust this number for yourself depending on amount of responses you are getting. So if you're not getting enough responses, it could mean two things. The first one, your resume doesn't look good, which for your first job, it will look good. But if you are looking for your second job, and let's say you work for the company for 2 years or 3 years, maybe even 5 years, so your resume probably is outdated and the skills that you list in your resume are not relevant to the field anymore. Yes, I would say that 5 years ago in the industry, we used all the different tools, right? So if you list all the tools that you used 5 years ago in your resume and you apply, probably people won't get back to you because they need absolutely different tools. Okay, so this could be the reason. The second reason could be that you are not applying enough. So in this case, you need to increase the volume of applications you send to the companies. So maybe you need to send not 20 resumes every day. Maybe you need to send 30 or 40 or 50 resumes each day. On the other hand, it could be a different situation. You already fully booked. You don't have any capacity for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So let's say in your next 2 weeks, you already have 10, maybe like 12 interviews scheduled with the companies. So that's a lot. It is difficult to go through 10, 12 interviews in 2 weeks, right? So in this case, maybe you want to slow down and you want to apply to less positions, maybe only to 10 positions every day or 5 positions every day. Or maybe you even want to stop for some time and do not apply at all until you have some, availability. The next thing is do not apply on Fridays, Saturdays, and holidays, except jobs posted the same day. So that is because most recruiters, most HRs, they don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. So the first time they open your resume, potentially they open your resume could be Monday. And recruiters and HRs, they don't go through all the resumes that they get, at least not in every company. So they usually choose like 5 last resumes, like 5 resumes from the top of the stack, right? So they got like, I don't know, 50 resumes. They pick 5 top resumes. They don't go to the bottom. They open these 5 resumes, and if all these 5 resumes look good, then they invite these people to an interview. If they don't like someone, they go to the next one. They go to the 6th, like 7th resume, and so on. So my favorite day to apply, and the highest, I would say, open rate is when I send my resume on Sunday night. So if I send the resume on Sunday night, usually I get back on Monday or Tuesday, something like that. It doesn't mean that you don't need to apply on work days. Yes, apply on work days as well. I just don't apply on Fridays and Saturdays, as well as holidays. The next thing is do not miss November, December, and January, and as well May and June if you want to find a new job. So if you're looking for, if you're ready to move on to the next company and you're like close to these months, feel free to update your resume and start applying to the position. So during this time, we usually see increased volume of open positions, about like 10% increase. About 10%. That is because November, December, and January, usually companies already have their budgets confirmed for the next year, and they can hire new people, they can close some open positions. A lot of these positions will be contract positions, and typical time for lifespan for a contract is 6 months. And this actually explains why some companies are hiring in May and June, because a lot of contracts will be expired and then they will try to bring new people to the company, to the team. Okay. But if it is your first job, don't wait until May. Obviously, start applying right after you get all our instructions. And the last but not least, never get discouraged, because job hunting is hard, job hunting is difficult, and you'll definitely fail a few interviews. This is not the end of the world. Try to get as many experience as possible from your failures. Try to improve yourself. Try to understand why you've been rejected, and then try again. So, all of you will definitely fail at least one interview. This is pretty normal for people who are looking for, not even for their first job in the industry, but even for people who has a lot of experience. And don't forget, everything is difficult before it is easy. So keep trying, keep applying. Don't stress a lot about failures. Try to learn something from that failure. Okay, so let's see if you have any questions. And then we can move on to the next step. For how long the first job contract? It depends on the contract. It could be 6 months, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, or maybe you get a full-time position right away. So 50% of our students are getting full-time positions from their first job. And some people, they get contract positions, and some people actually prefer to work as contractors. Do we still have access to the course during internship? For sure, you have access to these course forever. Will we also have a cover letter? Cover letters are not required in this field. Actually, most people don't send cover letters, so just apply with your resume. And I have, well, at least one reason why. So you want to apply to about 30 positions every day. And cover letter is something that is, in my opinion at least, is something very, something personal about the company, like why you want to work for the company. And if you need to tailor your cover letter, or if you need to tailor your resume for each company, you won't be able to apply to these many positions every day. One exception, you already have a job and you have a dream company, you have a dream job, and you want to work for that company. So let's say, Jan, you want to work for Amazon. So in this case, you can be a little bit more personal. You can personalize your resume. You can do the same with your cover letter, and then you send it to the company. Otherwise, do not attach a cover letter. Are we using current and up-to-date tools? Yes, of course. What if there is not that many jobs to apply to 30, 40, 50 jobs? It won't happen. We have thousands of jobs, even now. What is the best way to keep up on the new tools? Just be curious about these tools and also switch jobs pretty often. So you can get exposed to different tools and different different tools that you can use. Do companies rehire a lot of contract positions? Sometimes. We will talk about this in our last session when we discuss the difference between contract positions and full-time positions. Can we ask for feedback after an interview? You definitely can. Sometimes HRs provide this feedback, sometimes they don't. Or very often when they provide the feedback, actually, you cannot use it. In my opinion, they're very lazy, or they have a very, heavy workload. They cannot answer every, to every email and give a feedback to every candidate. But sometimes they do this. Did you have an experience to interview people from careerist? Not at my workplace. Should I keep my current lab job and get a manual QA at evening time so that I feel safe for job security? If you can do that, do that. But since this is a new field for you, you want to be like 100% dedicating your time to the QA job. So I don't know if it is possible or not, but definitely you can learn much faster if it is your only position. Definitely don't quit your job before you find a job in QA. That is for sure. Is the interview process just as long for contract positions? Unfortunately, yes. I missed the resume part. Could you say a little, please? You didn't miss anything. We don't talk about resumes today. You will have a dedicated lesson to like about creating a resume. Will we discuss what will be included in salaries? Definitely yes. I'll give the overview in our last session. Are we supposed to sign into Jazz or wait until a specific lesson? Don't rush, just follow the instructions. If I can't leave my current job, what a chance to find half-part job to keep going with practicing QA. Could be difficult, but not impossible. Is adding careerist bootcamp certificate a big plus on the resume? In my opinion, all these certificates are not very important in a resume. So that's why we usually put all these certificates even below the education, because we want people to see the skills that we know and the experience that we have first. And if you have a certificate, well, it could be a little plus, but yeah, I personally don't put all my certificates on my resume. Okay, don't see any other questions. So let's take a quick break. Let's take 10 minutes break, and then we can continue with the next step. So I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Hey, welcome back, and let's continue. So we applied to the positions, right? So we got some emails, we replied to these emails, we provide our availability. So the next step is the phone screening, the introduction to the company. So this is the very first conversation. Oh, you can hear me? Okay, all good. I can. Okay, if you cannot hear me, please check your settings. So probably the problem is on your end, because I can see everyone can hear me. Yeah, so check your Zoom settings. Okay, so we have the interview. We have the phone screening interview. And the phone screening interview is a short conversation with an HR or with a recruiter. And this is the initial interview. This is non-technical interview at all. So HRs and recruiters, they don't know much about QA, about all this technology, about different tools, different types of testing, and so on. So they're basically looking for a good fit. They're looking for a good character. They are not looking for someone who has a lot of experience in tech, and they definitely don't check that experience during this interview. So the typical scenario for this conversation is that they introduce themselves, they talk a little bit about the company. Usually they cannot talk about the team or the role, because HRs usually, especially in big companies, they usually work with multiple departments, with multiple teams, and they hire not only tech people, but also sales people, customer service people, and so on. So they don't know much about the QA job. Yes, they know a little, but not a lot. And after they introduce themselves, they give a chance to introduce yourself to you. And they usually ask a question, which is, tell me about yourself, or basically tell me about your work experience, walk me through your resume. And this question is actually very, very common. So this question is so common, so I decided to have a dedicated slide for this question. So we will skip this one for now, and we'll get back to it in the next slide. So let's pretend you answer this question. So the next thing is they want to do a short overview of technology you are familiar with and your skills. Don't forget, they don't know the skills. They don't know much about technology. They usually just have a list of things that you need to know, and they ask you about these things. And this is just yes, no questions. So you don't need to be specific. You don't need to give a lot of examples about these tools or share your experience with these tools. You just you just answer to this correct question. So if they ask you, do you know ADB commands? You don't explain to them how you use ADB commands, what commands do you know, and so on. You just say, yes, I do know ADB commands. That's it. And then they move on to the next question, like, do you know Xcode? And if you know Xcode, you say, yes, I know Xcode, and so on and so on. So the only thing that they could ask, like a follow-up question, is like, if I would ask you to rate yourself from 0 to 10 on this tool, on this technology, what would be the score? And I actually do not recommend you to go very low even if you know this tool just a little and you don't have much experience with that tool. The good answer would be like 7 or 8 if you at least know the tool. Definitely don't go to 9 and 10. Well, 10, in my opinion, is just impossible. No one knows anything on 10. Well, maybe someone knows, but it just gives this sense of overconfidence, which is not very attractive. Also, don't go to like, don't go very low. Don't say like 1, 2, 3, even 4 and 5 is not that good. It just gives a sense that, yes, I've heard about that tool maybe once or twice. I've never used this tool, but yeah, I know this tool exists. So a good answer will, if they ask you to rate yourself, is like 7, maybe 8, maybe 6 if you're like not confident at all. But that's it for this question. And they cannot evaluate your knowledge just in like a few minutes, and the whole interview takes only 20 minutes. So they definitely don't have time to ask all those questions. The next question they ask, and they always ask this question, why are you leaving your current position? And people in QA usually leave their current position because they don't have a challenge anymore. They've learned pretty much everything about their product, about their current tools, about all the technology that they use in the company, and they want to learn something new. They want to move on. They want to work with a different product, with a different technological stack, and so on. So that's why people leaving their current positions. If it is your first job in QA, well, then definitely you are leaving your current position because you've decided to switch your career. You want to work in a tech industry now. So that's why you're leaving your current company and joining a different company as a QA engineer. Then possibly you can get a few behavioral questions like, what is your weakness? What is your strength? Have you ever had a conflict at work or something like that? So we will go over a few behavioral questions, but after this lesson, you will get access to the a Google document, which you can obviously download and use. And we've collected a lot of interview questions in that document that you can get during the interview. And we also prepared a few answers, a few examples, how you can approach the question. So make it a habit to open this file every day and go over at least like 5 questions. And then when you reach to the end of the file, just start over and just practice in your free time answering these questions and think about these questions. Then this is the legal thing. They need to go over your work status. They want to know that you are eligible to work in the territory of the United States. So you need to have some documents. So you need to have your work authorization or your green card or something else to be able to work in the US. And the last but not least, they go over, they give you opportunity to ask your own questions. And if you have no questions, that is a red flag for an interviewer. So if you don't have any questions, then you're just demonstrating that you're not curious about company, you don't care about the company, and basically you're looking for any job. And it could be true, but you know, for the interview, prepare a few questions. Plus, it's a huge opportunity to understand the work-life balance in the company, what are the problems in the company. You can ask about some stuff that could help you to understand the goals of the company and so on. So prepare a few questions for the end of the interview, and don't forget that having no questions is a red flag. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's see if you have any questions. Will the company call me internationally? I am legal to work in the US, but I moved out of the country. My recommendation is to create a virtual number. Just Google it and try to create a virtual number. And like the number that you can use on Skype or some other application like Google Voice and so on. Yeah, Google Voice number is free. If it is a remote job, what should the dress code for the interview be like? Be business casual. Definitely don't overdress. This is a tech company. We all wear hoodies and, t-shirts. But for the interview, be business casual. You said we have access to the slides and videos forever after we finish the internship. Yes, that is correct. What to say if they ask me about some tool I don't know, or if they ask me if I know automation? Well, that's okay. You don't have to know every single tool that we have in QA field. Some tools you know, some tools you don't know, but you can add that you're a quick learner and you can actually learn any tool in a short period of time. You can prove it that you've graduated from a QA bootcamp just in 2 months, and now you know all this information about QA testing, which is absolutely true. Oh, and regarding automation, as I've said before, no one expects a QA engineer to know automation. So if they need an automation engineer, if they need someone who knows how to code, they will be looking for an automation engineer, not a manual QA engineer. I got the QA bundle. When do you recommend taking the automation class after this manual class? Get some experience in QA. That will help you a lot during the automation class, and then feel free to enroll. So maybe, I don't know, try to work for a few months as a manual QA, and then you can start the automation class. We can use the Slack group too. To use the Slack group for what? Sorry, maybe I missed the message before. But yeah, you can definitely use Slack. What is the common schedule for QA positions? What do you mean by the common schedule? Like your working hours? If so, usually it is 9 to 5. The minimum average salary for junior QA. We will discuss this in our last session. Which website will be the best for applying? Or job looking platform. I personally like LinkedIn. I like Indeed. I like Glassdoor. But feel free to use any. We will give you a set of websites that you can use for your job search. So you can just apply, upload your resume on all these websites and start applying to the positions. Do we have access to the Slack group after the internship job? Yes, you have. Have you heard of DICE? Yes. You can use dice.com to apply to the position. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, tell me about yourself question. So This is the most common question that you can get during your tech interviews, during these job interviews. And pretty much every interviewer will ask you this question. It could come in many different ways. It could be asked as, tell me about yourself, what's your story, tell me about your previous experience, walk me through your resume, and so on and so on. So note, this story is yours. So every story will be different. So, and we have no strict rules to the story, but I want to give you a few recommendations that you can utilize. First of all, treat this question as your sales pitch. This is indeed your sales pitch. You're trying to sell yourself to the company. So it should be a successful story. You need to mention all your accomplishments among the job responsibilities. If you don't have any previous experience in QA, talk about the internship, talk about the boot camp, and so on. Don't go back to your very first job or something like that. Don't talk about the non-relevant experience, especially don't talk about the experience and things that are not in your resume. The next thing is you will be talking to different people with different roles. So you want to adjust your story for an interviewer. So let's say when you are talking to someone from the technical field, from the technical team, you want to be very specific about the tools that you use and that you know. You want to give some examples. You want to give some reasons why you use that that tool, not another tool, and so on. When you talk to an HR, they don't know much about QA. They don't know much about all these technologies. So focus on some soft skills and try to present your character, not your past experience. Try to incorporate that into the story. The same adjust for a job. So if you applied to a mobile testing position, don't talk a lot about your web testing experience and vice versa. So they want to hear about your experience that is relevant to the position. So always keep that in mind. Non-relevant experience, don't mention that at all. Don't mention your past experience that is not from the technical field, except it is relevant to the current position. Don't mention about your hobbies. And I was actually very surprised when I did my first interview and a person started talking about their passions and their hobbies. Yeah, I was very surprised. I didn't know that people do that. They do. Don't do that. Don't talk about your hobbies. You can discuss that later with your team during the lunch or something. But don't mention that during the interview. So try to be as professional as possible. And the last piece is about timing. So if you go over 10 minutes, that is usually too long. I would even say way too long. If you go over 5 minutes, that's long. Okay, so 5 minutes, I would say this should be a limit. Ideally, well, personally, my story is like 3 minutes long, and I can fit all my past experience in 3 minutes. So try to do the same. And to achieve that, you can practice in advance. I actually highly encourage you to practice in advance. Take your spouse, take your friend, or just talk in front of the mirror and try to tell this story to them and try to practice this. So if you think this is weird, this is odd to tell this story to your friend, just imagine that, like, how this could be difficult to tell this story to someone who you see for the very first time in your life, and then you are telling the story for the very first time in your life as well. So try to practice in advance and try to know what you are talking about. The other part is I know that some students, some people, they prefer to write down the story and then they just read the story. Don't do that, because even if I can recognize when someone is reading the story and not telling the story, just imagine how HRs and recruiters, they have like very professional, they do these interviews every day, like multiple times every day, and they definitely can say when someone is reading or if someone is telling the story. And if you're afraid that you can forget something, I can give you a tip. So just write down, like use bullet points or use a checklist and write down all the topics that you want to mention during the story. And then just go through this, topics. And in this case, you will sound like you are telling the story, and at the same time, you have kind of some notes for yourself in case you are stressed or you think that you can forget something. So create this checklist. And definitely you will practice the story with our mentors, and you will have a few mock interviews where you can practice the story. Okay, let's see if you have any questions. How long is the careerist internship? 3.5 weeks. Yeah, it's minimum, but you can stay longer if you need this. Yes, please don't talk about non-relevant experience. Will you say yours so we can have an example? So I usually start with my last company. I talk about, again, like I've mentioned before, I talk about my accomplishments. I talk about my job responsibilities. Then I talk a little bit about the team, about the product, about the team, what challenges I have or had in the past, how I overcame that challenges, and then I explain why I am looking for a new job, for a new position. Is there multiple people at once in Zoom interviewing me? Sometimes I get nervous. Usually you have one person who interviews you. Sometimes when you get to the last round of the interview, which is face-to-face interview, it is possible that you have two people in the room or in a Zoom call at the same time. So, but you always talk to one person. The second person is just shadowing. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions. So let's move on to the next one. Oh, now I want to show you this funnel with the numbers. And I hope this will make more sense why you need to apply that much. So when you send from 100 to 150 to 200 resumes, the response rate is very low. So probably you'll get from 25 to 35 responses from HRs or recruiters. These 25 to 35 responses can give you from 20 to 30 phone screens, so initial phone calls. 20 to 30 initial interviews will give you from 10 to 20 technical screens. And 10 to 20 technical screens give you from 3 to 7 on-site interviews. And this amount is enough actually to get at least one job offer. Probably you can get more, but at least one job offer you can get for sure if you apply to these many positions and if you know how to be good during the interview. Okay. So again, apply a lot, apply to as many positions as possible. That is very, very important. A lot of people fail on this very first step. When they apply to like 5 companies, they get 0 replies and they think like, oh, I don't have any experience. That's why they don't call me. No, that's because you don't apply enough. Okay, so the next step is you get yes from your HR manager, not hiring manager, from your HR, and you go to the next step. The next step is technical interview, and usually it is the interview with your hiring manager, with the QA manager. So technical screening is usually scheduled over phone, Skype, Google Hangouts, Zoom, etc. So be ready to turn on your camera because it could be a little bit awkward when your interviewer turns their camera on and then you cannot do the same. So maybe you are not dressed properly, maybe you don't have a nice background, maybe you're calling from a car. I've heard stories like that. Don't do that. Maybe for your initial call with a recruiter that is okay, but not with the hiring manager. So be prepared, be dressed appropriately, have a nice quiet place, have a good background, or at least use a virtual background, and be ready to turn your camera on. So you can be contacted by a member of the QA team, dev team, team lead, or manager. So usually it is a QA manager. So 95% of the time you are talking to a QA manager. And the typical scenario for this conversation is they introduce themselves. They can talk definitely much more since they're managers about their team, about the role. They can talk more about the responsibilities, about like actual responsibilities, not the responsibilities that are mentioned in the job description. So if you see in a job description that they want you to know Python, and then during the introduction, they actually don't say anything about Python or coding or something, that happens very, very often. So again, just apply to all the positions you can find. Don't filter them by the job description, filter them by the job title. And then you get this the most common question again, and you asked about your previous work experience. So you go through this question, you talk about your past experience if you have it, or you talk about the bootcamp or your internship if you don't have any experience, or if it is your first job. And by the way, I think I forgot to mention that, but these 3 sessions, they are relevant not only for your first job. This will be the same for your second job, for your third job, and so on. So sometimes I mention something and I say like, you have experience. This is for your future positions, because I believe you want to grow your salary. So you will be switching your jobs pretty often. Okay, so keep that in mind. After you finish with this question, then you do a deep dive into the technical part of your current role. And this is usually for people who already have some experience. So the interviewer wants to know the tools that you're using, the percentage of work you do for mobile versus for web applications, what tools you are using, how you use these tools, and so on and so on and so on. So again, deep dive into the technical part of your current role. If you don't have it, probably they don't talk about this. Maybe they talk about the internship. But usually, if you don't have the experience, they just skip this part and move on to the next one. theoretical questions related to current position, to current role. So this is what they could ask you, like, how do you report the bug? Since you're pretty new in the field, they want to confirm that you know how to report the bug, how to write a test case, and so on. So they could ask these questions. They could ask you, they could give you a hands-on online exercise. They share their screen, they show you some web page, and they ask you to test this page or to come up with some test cases, or they show you a bug on this page and they ask you to report this bug. So they share a link with you to Google Docs or something like that. And when you are typing in a Google Doc, they can actually see what you are typing in real time. So we will practice this in our next lesson. The next part is open questions about the tools required for the position. So they can ask you how familiar you are with these tools. Could you name certain commands? Can you give some examples? What are the alternatives? And so on and so on. So you should be prepared for these questions. So repeat all the material that you have. And the last 5 minutes of the interview are usually saved for your questions. Again, if you have no questions, it's a red flag, so prepare some questions. When you talk to an HR, you usually don't ask technical questions, but when you talk to a technical manager, when you talk to a QA manager, you can actually ask questions about the technical part of the role. You can ask questions about the team, like how many devs are on the team, how many QAs are on the team, and so on. So go ahead and ask all these questions. And by asking these questions, you can kind of predict your workload in the company. So if they have like 10 developers and you will be the first QA on the team, well, usually it means, well, it depends if they had a QA before or not, but usually it means that they have no test cases, they have no processes in place, and so on and so on. So this is an opportunity. Well, first of all, this is more work, but second of all, you have an opportunity to create a lot of test cases, to work on test plans, to set up the process. And of course, people will help you to do that. But at the end, you'll get a lot of experience. If it is not your first job and you want to have a little bit more flexible schedule, you don't want to work from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. and be very stressed. Well, in this case, if you have like, I don't know, 3 devs and 1 QA, this is a perfect ratio, I would say. 3 devs to 1 QA. So maybe 4 devs to 1 QA. Again, think about these questions in advance and then ask these questions. Okay, let's see if you have any questions. Should we start applying now? No, don't apply it. Don't apply right now. Does Jazz apply as well? Yes, you can use Jazz to apply to this, to the job positions. Can I tell them this is my first job? Well, they will see this from your resume. How does that work if you are not familiar with the tool they use? Try to make a note and learn a little bit about this tool, so you are prepared for the next interview. But again, it is okay not to know a tool or even a few tools. It could be something very specific to the industry or to the company. If I am applying to 500 jobs a day, that must mean there are 500 new jobs available each day. Well, you're not applying to 500 jobs every day. it will be impossible. But 30 jobs every day, definitely yes. And we have enough jobs to apply to. Would they talk about agile and methodology? Usually no. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Okay, so you nailed the technical interview. You are going to the next step. The next step is in-person interview. And if you made it to on-site, congratulations. Many companies invite only a few candidates to an on-site interview, to the last round of interviews. And because of that, the chances to get a job are very, very high. They don't invite people they don't like. They don't want to waste their time and time of their employees to interview you. And so your goal here is not to be the best QA engineer in the world, to be the best in QA testing and so on. Your goal is to be better than others. And for this, I have a few interview tips that you can use. So first of all, before you go to the on-site interview, and if you didn't do that before, get familiar with the product and with the company, of course. So if it is a mobile application, download that mobile app. If it is a paid mobile app, pay for that app. It's a good investment. And usually apps, they don't cost a lot. So definitely do that. Also, if it is a web application, go to their website, create an account, log into the account, try to explore the product. And when you're exploring the product, notice what you like and what you don't like about it, okay? The next thing you can do is to read reviews about the product. And when you are reading these reviews, outline the best and the worst features users mention. And if you agree with that, you can mention that during the interview. Especially when you talk to product people or to managers, or even like people from the team, believe it or not, well, believe it, I guess, they all know these worst features that they have, and they know this is a problem. And when you point them to that thing, when you mention that you are aware of these problems, of these issues, you will get a huge plus. So they already know that you invested some time into their product. So you're already familiar with their product. You know how to use the product. You know that they have all these features, and you also know about some bad experience that some people have. So that will be your advantage. The next thing is study the interviewers. So before you go to the interview, you usually get an email with the list of people who are interviewing you. Try to find these people on LinkedIn and try to read their profiles and understand what are their positions in the company. So if it is a product manager, well, you know, this is a product manager, you know what to talk about with the product manager. You don't talk about tech, you talk about the product, you ask them questions like, what's your vision for the product? What is your next big step? And so on. If you talk to a developer, you can talk about some technology that they use. You can talk about problems that they have. You can talk about their interaction with the QAs and so on. When you talk to QAs, you talk about the QA processes on the team and in the company and so on. So basically, you can adjust to the interviewer in advance and prepare your questions in advance. Okay, so it doesn't make sense to ask a product manager about tools that QA use and vice versa. Another thing that you need to do before this interview is to prepare for common questions. I've talked about this already. You have a document with the most common questions. So go over this document and try to prepare for all these questions. And the last but not least, when you go to the interview on-site, when you go to the office, print out a few extra copies of your resume. Maybe you've updated your resume. Maybe you want to give them an updated version of the resume. Maybe someone decides to join the interview in the last minute. So you have an extra copy. In case they don't, you have an extra copy for them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's kind of technical, the same as technical interview, but you talk to different people. Okay, so let's see if you have any questions, and then we can move on to the next section. If we applied for remote job, do we have to fly to the place to do in-person interview, or can we do Zoom interview? Definitely, it could be possible that they want to see you in the office. In this case, you need to fly to their location, and they definitely pay for your flight, for your accommodation, for your food, and so on. But usually, if the work is a remote position, you can do it online. Can we apply for remote only? Yes, of course, you can apply to remote only positions. Where are the most common questions located? They will be attached to today's lesson as soon as we upload this video to our platform. Okay, we have only 9 minutes left, and I want to go over a few interview questions. And yes, you will have this. You have these interview questions in the list. I just want to talk about the most important questions today. And the first question is, what would you do if you created a bug report and the developer tells you they cannot reproduce it? This is possible. So the thing that you need to do is to try to reproduce this bug by yourself. If you cannot reproduce it, well, then it means the bug doesn't exist, and you just close out the ticket and you move on. If you can see, if you can, if you still see that bug, then if you work in the office, you just come over to their desk and show them how to reproduce this bug. You can do the same on the Zoom call. If it is not possible, you work in different time zones. Just add all the required screenshots, or you can create a video recording. The next question is, if you find the bug and a developer says it is as designed, or if it is not a bug, what would you do? So in this case, you need to find the source of truth. And usually you can find it in the documentation. If you have no documentation, then you can ask your project or product manager about the feature and confirm if it is a bug or if it is not a bug. And then get back to a developer and just confirm if it is a bug or if it is not a bug. Question number 3. How would you test a toaster, a bottle, a can, etc.? About this object. So it could be anything. It could be a building. It could be some structure. It could be Golden Gate Bridge. It could be something, basically anything. So this question is not about how you test the exact object, the given object. It's about your approach. So first thing, you need to understand that you cannot test anything if you have no requirements. So the first thing you need to do is to ask them if they have any requirements. And if they do, you just use their requirements. If they don't, you come up with your own requirements, and then you test against these requirements. So the first thing you want to test, so let's say you are testing a toaster and you have requirements that the, let's start with the functional part. you can toast up to 4 pieces of bread. You can toast a bagel as well. You can change the temperature setting. You can stop the toasting process at any time. And then a few non-functional, the color of this toaster should be black and the length of the cord should be 6 feet, let's say. So you start with positive test scenarios. You start with functional testing. You test that you can toast up to 4 pieces of bread or bagel. You test that you can change the temperature setting. You test that you can stop the toasting process. And then you test all the other requirements that you have. So then you switch to non-functional part. You verify that the color of this toaster is black. You measure the length of the cord, it should be 6 feet. And only after that, you can switch to negative testing. So you test scenarios that potentially should not happen, or potentially that the user should not use toaster in a way that you test. So you can bring the toaster to high altitude, or you can try to run the toaster under the rain, or toss the toaster in water, and so on. So you are confirming that if a user does something that is not expected, it won't basically harm the client. Okay, so that's how you approach this type of question. The next two are very easy. What would you do once you found the bug? Well, once you found the bug, you confirm that you retest it a few times, you confirm it is a bug, and then you create a bug report. How can a tester be, and you put all the required information, of course, into that, on that bug report. How can a tester be sure that a bug has been fixed? Very easy. In a bug report, you have all the required steps to reproduce a bug. You just follow all these steps, and if you don't see the bug, it means that the bug has been fixed. Question number 6. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you actually can see yourself in 5 years in many different roles, many different positions. You can for sure be a product manager, a developer, someone else, a DevOps, if you decide to. But usually they want to hear that you want to stay with the company long term and you want to stay in the QA field. So maybe in 5 years, you want to become a QA automation engineer and stay with a good company for a long time. Question number 7. Why did you choose to become a QA engineer? And actually, we don't have answer for this question for you. So think about this in advance, think about it. Why have you decided to become a QA engineer? Why have you decided to switch your career and start working in the tech field? So just think about this question in advance. It is possible that you can get this question if it is your first job in the industry. Why are you leaving your current company? Again, I answered this question already. For someone who is looking for the very first job in QA, it's a good answer. It's a good explanation. Why are you leaving your current company? Because you've decided to become a QA engineer. That's why. Question 9. What can you bring to the company? And also, what is your strength? Actually, these two questions are about the same. So they want to hear about the tools that you know, they want to hear about technology that you know, that you have some experience if you have it. So present all this to the interviewer. Not very common, not many people will ask these questions. The same is for the what is your weakness? Not very common question. But I still want to talk about the weaknesses, because If you Google this question, a lot of people advise to give your strength and play it as your weakness. Example, they recommend to say that you are a workaholic, that you work too much, or they give advice to say that you are a perfectionist, you want to complete all the tasks perfectly. So in my opinion, very weak answers to this question. And if you're a perfectionist, it will be difficult for you to create a lot of test cases in one day. So let's say you need to create 50 test cases in one day. If you're a perfectionist, it will be pretty much impossible. If you're a workaholic, well, all workaholics end up being burnt out, and no one wants to work with a burnt out person in the same team. So again, weak answers. A good answer, in my opinion, is to give your real weakness, but give your real weakness from the past. So you had a weakness in your past, then you acknowledged that weakness, you took some actions and you overcame that weakness, you overcame that problem. So now you don't have this weakness. And the second part is you want to demonstrate, you want to show that that happened not only once in your life. You want to show that that is your pattern, that you always think in this way. So you have a weakness, you acknowledge this weakness, you work on that weakness. So for example, you can say that you want to become a QA automation, but you don't know how to code. And you are taking an action now. You are taking a class on coding, or you are taking a class on automation. That's how you can overcome the weakness. Of course, if you are doing that. And the last question, what would you do in case of personal conflict? And of course, we are talking about a personal conflict at work. So I usually answer this question. I start answering this question with a statement that I've never had a conflict at work. So, and even if you had a conflict at work in the past, I totally understand that could happen. Not all managers, not all co-workers are great, and that could happen. Just don't mention this part then at all when you are answering this question. And just move on to the second part and say that you know how to resolve these conflicts at work. So the first thing that you do, you talk to a person that you have a conflict with, and just by having this conversation could resolve the conflict itself. A lot of time, this is just some miscommunication, some misexpectations, some misunderstandings. And just by having a conversation, an honest conversation with the person could resolve the conflict itself. If the conflict is not resolved, the next step you can take is to talk to your manager. And you talk to your manager in informal way. So you just mentioned that you have a conflict, but you don't want to take some formal steps yet. So you can ask them to talk to that person or to give you advice. And since managers have a lot of experience with people, they could help you to resolve the conflict. And the last step, the last action you can take is to file a formal request to your manager or to your HR business partner. And from that point, it's not your problem anymore. So they will take some actions to resolve the conflict. Usually it happens between developers. Two devs have a conflict. Let's say they are arguing about technology that they want to use or about some job responsibilities, and they cannot agree on that. And usually these two devs or these two people will be put in two different teams. And as soon as they do not interact with each other, they don't have a conflict anymore. Okay, that's it. Let me see your final questions. Because I like to break things. Yeah, I like this one, but be more descriptive. For question 2, is it possible to discuss with product owner to verify that it is part of the requirement and not a bug? Yes, of course. Yeah, that's what you want to do. Question about the question number 1. Just rewatch this video, rewatch this, me answering this question in the video when we upload it. Okay. Who can I reach out to about the homework? You can reach out to our support team. Okay, that's it for tonight. Have a great rest of your night and bye-bye. Have a good night.